everybody out there on the internet? It's the Roller Geezer, and today I'm going to respond to a comment that I received on my Wooddale High School session. This came from an individual who complimented that the video looked good, but had a question regarding, in fact I'll use their words, have you ever had trouble with the police claiming you are trespassing? And they're afraid to go out and find new places as a result. Well, nowadays it's different than what it used to be. When I first started skating, was in Arizona, and I had a small crew of, I would say, easily about 6 to 8 on a regular basis. And getting kicked out was a regular thing. The police in the small town that we lived in at that point just knew us, so we really didn't have too much of a problem per se. The biggest issue was just when the locals would get upset, and it basically boiled down to, if they start screaming and if they threaten to call the police, try your best to mitigate the situation. Do not come across as abrasive. That was a big learning lesson for a lot of people when I first started skating with them, because I was a lot more mellow than the rest of them, and I tried to mitigate things. If they do threaten to call the police, just respectfully leave. Just say, okay, that's fine. And when I moved back home to Pennsylvania, the crew that I was skating with then, there were a couple of hotheads, but we were a little bit more mellow than the crew that I had in Arizona. Primarily, we were more smart alecky than anything. One instance that pops up right now, we used to have this hospital in Johnstown. It's still there. It's not like it hadn't gone anywhere, but before they went through a huge renovation, behind one of the buildings was this really awesome rail that probably went on for 100 plus feet. It was a nice mellow rail, and I remember we got busted actually off the hospital grounds by hospital security, and he said that he had footage of us skating this rail that we weren't skating. It was near the front, and it was this crazy drop rail, and he was like, come on, I need your names and all this because we have footage of you. And this is one of the few times where I would say that being a smart aleck actually paid off, because my good friend Ryan asked the cop if we could see the footage, because he said, in his own words, if you're claiming that we did this rail, we'd love to see, because we'd love to see that footage. Because if any of us could do that, that would be awesome. Which was true, because I mean, the end of that rail was like a 15-foot drop. And yeah, if any of us could have done it, that would have been in like one of our sponsor me tapes or something like that, because it was one of those rails that was not a joke. And so we caught that security guard in a lie, and he just dropped it and we left. And, you know, it's one of those precarious balances where you're trying to figure out how you want to handle the situation. One of the best things I recommend is, again, the being a level-headed person. Number 2, do not run away. I had an experience with that in Bisbee, Arizona, where because 2 of my friends ran, it's like, well, what do I do? And we ran. We were at the only school in that part of the area, and we had this guy who, I'm supposing even today that he was a great football player for the school, and went out to try out for like some college team, just didn't pan out, so I ended up going to police academy, and now he's like the sheriff or whatever of the town. I don't really know what his position was, but he really loved to say the term "chat my ass" about things. It was just really weird, and I just remember that my friend Mike and Kurt were both in the back seat of this police car. And this was like a few days before I was supposed to leave Arizona, and I'm thinking, oh, this is great. But he eventually let us out. Just a little learning lesson there. Nowadays, it's a lot different because, well, I'm older, and I'm the only one that I skate with. It's very rare that I have a chance to do that anymore, so I have to be kind of tactful with what I do. And the town that I live in currently, it's a decent sized town, but it still has that small town feel. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's big enough that it actually has its own minor league team, but it's still got this weird small town feel. When it comes to actually skating street spots, my first suggestion is finding those places where, no one's really going to care. And sometimes that's tough because you just never know until somebody pops up. A couple of my favorite skate spots in town include this small rail in front of what used to be a bar, but now is I believe it's a place where people sell. It's a thrift store that all the proceeds benefit raising awareness for domestic violence and things like that. 2 years ago, I had a problem with the landlord. He and I just really didn't give him too much guff. I was trying to be nice about it. I was just like, look, I just want to skate this, and if you have a problem with that, I'll sign a waiver. Which that ploy has never worked, and I've also offered to buy that rail from him because it's really fun rail, but it just didn't pan out. And now my solution for that is I go in at a very early hour. I'm a morning person to begin with, and so I start my days at 5 o'clock in the morning, and now that it's summer, daybreak here is 5:45, and so I have skated that rail at 6 in the morning. I know for a lot of people that might be insane, but sometimes it works. Other places you need to go find. Schools I find are really good, especially if you can find a spot in the school that's sort of hidden away from things, so it doesn't attract attention. Skating off hours is probably the best thing that I can recommend. That's for me. That's usually been the best. Those times like 6 o'clock in the morning. Who's up to begin with? Who's gonna mess with you? But in terms of what happened at Wooddale, that's a bit of a unique situation. First of all, that's in Memphis, Tennessee. They've got bigger problems to deal with than some vagrants who are skating a high school. And the high school itself looks like they just don't care anymore. Like, I don't know if you notice it in the skate video itself, but in all the places that looked heavily used, those benches, there is electrical tape on the cracks and crevices in the cement so that the skateboarders that normally hit that spot don't have any kind of stoppage on their board. I think the school just sort of let it go at this point because they figured, well, they're not doing anything really harmful. It's a detriment to society. Yes, they're marking up and chipping these benches and whatnot, but in reality, is that so bad in comparison to what they could be doing? Yeah, that's sort of always been my mentality. Like, I've had arguments with people several times, my hometown especially. I remember the day after Christmas this past year. Now, mind you, I'm 40, and I had this gentleman. It was below freezing. I just needed to go out and skate, and there was this one ledge that's pretty pristine that hadn't really been hit too much, and I waxed it, and I was skating it, and this guy who, just an older gentleman, started yelling at me. He's like, "Hey, you gonna pay the school for that?" And I could have been a complete smart aleck about the whole thing, because Well, thanks to circumstances beyond my control, I'm a homeowner in the area that pays that school's, through taxes. I pay for that school, so technically I said I could have. But I said, yeah, I'll pay for it. I don't care. Damages are damages. Whatever. And he's like, yeah, right. But, I don't really pick those fights anymore. It's not worth it. Especially at my age. It's just like, what are you doing? Case in point, I work on a college campus. I teach classes, and there's this one spot behind our music building that is phenomenal. I've been caught there by campus security, and then they realized who I was, and then asked me, why am I doing this? And I said, well, this is one of the few ways in which I get my creative release. You got to understand that. And they're like, well, you can't be doing this here anymore. So my relationship with our campus security is a little awkward now, especially given the other work that I do on campus. So it's kind of funny when I think about it. But I do my best to make sure that I try to keep it mutual. I mean, we still joke about it, but I still try to sneak in every once in a while when they're not looking. But when it comes to the spots, like I say, off time hours is usually a good thing. Never go anywhere near a place that's got like a high traffic, like a lot of people onlooking, because for me that's always works. It's like, I don't want to make a scene. I'm just here to do my thing, and that's it. If you're non-confrontational, it might be a lot harder for you, because some people get in your face screaming at you about things. I mean, more often than not, I think anymore the mentality is, oh, these kids are out doing some exercise. That's great, because they see a lot of kids nowadays who just don't do anything but sit in front of their televisions or phones, playing with the doodads and not really doing anything physical. So I think more often than not that's been the case. It has happened to me in the past, which I find really weird, because I feel like I've just stumbled in the Twilight Zone, but it makes sense. But there's going to be a few people who just, I don't know, they're just wound really tight, and that's just how they are. I totally recommend, like I say, a few steps. One, if you find a spot, make sure you go there at times when not too many people were hanging around. Two, if someone does give you any kind of grief, just be polite. That's the best thing I can recommend. And 3, don't run. Again, I know this is kind of getting a little, circular here, but those are the things that I could totally recommend. I also had this one segment in a video that I made where I do it, like some of the interactions that we had with people in my hometown. And I don't know, I have it on YouTube. I will do my best to link it in this video, because it's just sort of funny. Wow, that segment's almost 20 years old now. But it's just like the people that we dealt with when we were skating, and just how weird people would get. So, yeah, again, basically all of this boils down, if there was a TLDR to this entire video, it would be, just don't be a jerk. Don't get in people's way, and if they ask you to leave, politely leave, and you'll be fine. I know it's scary sometimes to be yelled at and whatnot, but it'll be okay. So yeah, thanks again for listening. Do all the stuff on the interwebs with Horse Moment Media on Facebook and Roller Geezer on Instagram, and I will talk to you all later. Toodles. Toodles. Toodles.